So continuing with In Quest of Truth by Irene Conybeare, and first reader up is Gloria.
To know that life is real and eternal is to inherit unfading bliss. It is time that men had this realization by being unified with their own selves. Through unification with the higher self, man perceives the infinite self in all selves, and he becomes free by outgrowing and discarding the limitations of the ego life. The individual soul has to realize its identity with the universal soul with full consciousness. Men shall have a reorientation of life in the light of this ancient truth, and they will readjust their attitude towards their neighbors and everyday life. To perceive the spiritual value of oneness is to produce real unity and cooperation. Brotherhood then becomes a spontaneous outcome of true perception. The new life, which is based upon a spiritual understanding, is an affirmation of the truth. It's not something which belongs to utopia, but is completely practical. Now that humanity is thrown into continuous bloody conflicts, it is, through immense anguish, experiences the utter instability and futility of life, which is based upon purely material conceptions. The hour is near when men, in their eager longing for real happiness, will seek the true source of happiness. The time is also ripe when men will ardently seek to contact the embodiment of truth in the form of the God-man, through whom they can be inspired and lifted into spiritual understanding. They will accept the guidance which comes from divine authority, for only the outpouring of divine love can bring about spiritual awakening. In this critical time of universal suffering, men are becoming ready to turn towards the higher self and to fulfill the will of God. Divine love will perform the supreme miracle of bringing God into the hearts of man and of getting them established in lasting and true happiness. It will satisfy the greatest need and longing of mankind. Divine love will make people selfless and helpful in their mutual relations, and it will bring about the final solution of all problems. The new brotherhood on earth shall be a fulfilled fact, and nations will be united in the fraternity of love and truth. In another message, Meher Baba goes on to state, quote, the present world crisis, chaos, and the universal suffering are absolutely necessary for the eventual spiritual upliftment and for a new world wherein peace, love, and divine aspiration will reign supreme. None should therefore feel perplexed and dismayed, bearing in mind the certainty of the bright future. From the spiritual point of view of reality, the words national and foreign, kill and killer, war and peace, success and defeat have no existence and are quote, quote, imaginary dreams. And the present universal chaos is just a universal nightmare necessary for universal awakening. Body forms and minds are innumerable and of infinite variety, but souls are all originally and eternally one. In fact, only one infinite reality exists, and that is God. So this apparent world catastrophe is, by divine will, essential for a divine manifestation of love and real peace in the near future, in which I have to play the greatest part. Those who are spiritually awake have been aware for some time that the world is at present in the midst of a period such as always precedes avataric manifestations. Even unawakened men and women are becoming aware of it. From their darkness, they are reaching out for light. In their sorrow, they are longing for comfort. from the midst of the strife into which they have found themselves plunged. They are praying for peace and deliverance. For the moment, they must be patient. The wave of destruction must rise still further. But when from the depths of his heart, man desires something more lasting than wealth, something more real than material power, the wave will recede. Then peace will come, joy will come, light will come. The breaking of my silence, the signal for my public manifestation, is not far off. I bring the greatest treasure which is possible for man to receive, a treasure which includes all other treasures, which will endure forever, which increases when shared with others. Be ready to receive it. My existence is for love and truth, and to suffering humanity I say, have hope. I have come to help you in surrendering yourselves to the cause of God and in accepting His grace of love and truth. I have come to help you in winning the one victory of all victories, to win yourself. End quote.
Go ahead, Gloria, still
Okay.
another 5 minutes.
Appendix 1, Biographical Sketch of Meher Baba. Merwan Irani is a Zoroastrian and was born of Persian parents of Pune, India, in 1894. His father, Shahryar Irani, was a real seeker of God. Merwan attended a school and college at Pune. His spiritual life began with his momentous visit to a Muslim lady, Hazrat Babajan, a spiritually perfect master, when he was 19 and still a student of Deccan College. This meeting brought about a spiritual transformation of his consciousness and made him aware of his divine mission. In 1914, Merwan's absorption in God consciousness led to his being completely unconscious of the things of the world, and he remained in his transcendental state for 9 months. After this period, he visited Sai Baba, who greeted him as, between quotes, Parvardigar, asterisk, God as the preserver and sustainer, and sent him to Opsani Maharaj, who became his second spiritual master and helped him to come down to his normal consciousness during 7 years of close contact. In 1921, while retaining God consciousness, Merwan completely recovered his gross consciousness, i.e., his consciousness of the physical world and the universe. This is the state of the perfect master or Sadguru, for he is one who has transcended all limitations and attained to perfection or liberation and possesses the universal consciousness. After this, Merwan was called Meher Baba, which means compassionate friend or master. Such a being is called a Sadguru. That's it. Man become God. But Meher Baba is more than a Sadguru, for I understand he is the avatar. That means God become man, and therefore the supreme master of the universe. It is impossible to go into details of the development of the spiritual consciousness of man in this little book. Readers who wish to detailed explanation will find information in God Speaks, dictated by Meher Baba and published by Dodd Med and Company in New York, 1955. The early period of Meher Baba's life as a spiritual master can be conveniently divided into 3 parts, according to the places where he lived. First, the Hutt and Ferguson College Road, Pune, where he gathered together his first close men disciples. Second, Mansili Min Imam, the house of the master. bungalow at Dadar, Bombay, which was chiefly devoted to the training of his close men disciples, the Mandali, for an arduous spiritual life. And third, Meherabad Ahmednagar, which has been his quarters ever since. Here a new colony was established where the disciples put into practice under the master's guidance their training and selfless service. The training in selfless service. The interesting activities of the Meherabad colony included A. The Hazrat Babajan High School, where the students receive free instruction, B. A Dharmashala, or free shelter for the immigrant poor, and C. The Meher Charitable Hospital and Dispensary. Meher Baba also took a personal interest in the upliftment of the depressed classes. In all institutions, no distinction was made between Brahmin and untouchables, who mingled in common fellowship. His disciples of the colony were of different creeds, and caste distinctions came to be abolished among the Hindu disciples. The Meher Ashram, a free boarding school open to boys of all creeds and nationalities, was the second phase of Meher Baba's activities on an elaborately organized basis at Meherabad. One particular branch of this was for the spiritual awakening of a few chosen youngsters, who then began to have rare inner experiences ordinarily achieved with great difficulty by men after the struggle of a lifetime. This phase is described in detail by Ramju Abdullah in a book entitled Sobs and Throbs, published in 1928 by Meher Publications, Ahmednagar. From July 10, 1925, Meher Baba began to observe silence, the use of his alphabet board by which he pointed to the Roman letters and digits for communication. Came later in 1927, his silence for spiritual reasons as a prelude for his manifestation as avatar continues to this day. During the year 1926, Meher Baba wrote an account of his divine experience. This work has not been read by anyone, and we do not know when it will be published. Meher Baba often says that divine experience is beyond words, since it's beyond the domain of intellect, and therefore most spiritual secrets are and shall ever remain beyond the reach of ordinary human beings. But he says that there are certain spiritual secrets that can also be explained in words by a perfect master, and that he has explained some of these in this work. Upon completing the manuscript, he laid down his pen and has written nothing since beyond his signature. Meher Baba's subsequent words were dictated through the medium of his alphabet board. He was now, since 1954, stopped the alphabet board and communicates only through gestures. He is well versed in 6 languages, including English. Another characteristic of Meher Baba's life is that he frequently observes long fasts and periods of seclusion for intense spiritual working on the higher planes of cosmic consciousness for the good of humanity. Whatever work is done by one who has universal mind and infinite consciousness affects the whole universe spiritually, as it reverberates throughout the universe and produces or reflects action on all planes. Alternating with these periods of complete retirement, Meher Baba leads a dynamic life of activity.
Thank you, Glo. Marian, could you unmute and continue, please? Marian's having difficulty unmuting, I think.
I think you can unmute it.
Unmute, Miriam.
I know
You're
the
mute.
whole,
You're mute, Miriam.
But I think you can unmute her. Or maybe
No,
not.
no, you cannot.
I know you can mute her, but not
You are,
unmute.
you are mute, Marianne.
maybe it'll clear up a little later. How about Miguel? Could you read for us until Marion gets or take a
Mhm.
turn? About 10
Oh,
minutes or so, 12 minutes.
I was having trouble getting my cursor down there.
Oh yeah, sometimes that happens. Good. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. In 1931, Meher Baba first toured the West, visiting principally England and America. And it was at this time that he first contacted many of his Western disciples. Since that date, he has visited the West many times and has encircled the globe several times. His disciples today are of many nationalities, classes, and creeds, for the truth underlying every religion is the emblem of Meher Baba's teaching. For about 10 years, up to 1948, the lion's share of Meher Baba's external activities was utilized in his twofold work of comforting the mad from amongst uncared for and destitute people, and tending the musts, the God mad and God intoxicated, spiritually advanced, and illumined souls. In order to find the musts, see Appendix 10, it was necessary to visit all sorts of odd nooks and corners of the country. And during such journeys, Meher Baba must have traveled about 100,000 miles with next to no consideration for his own and his mandali's daily needs during these journeys. And in the course of organizing and maintaining a number of mad and must ashrams, meaning homes, for varying periods in different parts of India. In 1949, Meher Baba launched upon what is known as his new life, dissociating himself completely from owning and maintaining any kind of property, ashrams, or organizations. For about 2 years, he kept moving from place to place with a small group of men and women followers without any advanced preparations or provision for day-to-day requirements, so that at times they even went begging for food, shelter, and transport. Except under unavoidable circumstances, Baba and group maintained no contact or communications with others during the course of the new life phase, which ended in 1952. From 1952 till today, continuing to keep himself dissociated from all organizations and possessions, Meher Baba has only a small group of men and women living near him. And he spends most of his time either in total or partial seclusion, or in giving his sahavas, meaning company, to selected groups of followers, or darshan, meaning public appearance, to the masses in different parts of the country. The mass darshan programs are always open to all, and at them Meher Baba invariably establishes a personal contact by distributing prasad, meaning sweets or fruits, with his own hands to as many as possible. It is known that on many occasions he has thus distributed prasad to about 20,000 at a time. In this manner, spiritual contacts with the people are made.
So that asterisk.
The asterisk is the act of seeing, public veneration.
That's Darshan, yeah.
That's Darshan, that's connected to Darshan. Appendix 2. Dr. F.C. Conybeare, M.A., Fellow of University College, Oxford. Although my father gave the book Myth, Magic, and Morals to the rationalist press, I feel it is expedient to quote the following words from the French biography of my father by Louise Maurice, compiled after my father's death, which took place in 1924, page 304. Quote, Messrs. Watts and Company are the publishers of the books which issue from the Rationalist Press Association. It was fitting that they should become the publishers of the books which deny the historical existence of our Lord. They published Mr. J. M. Robertson's 2 books, Pagan Christs and Christianity and Mythology. They published Mr. W. B. Smith's Ecce Deus, and they published the English translation of Witnesses to the Historicity of Jesus by Professor Arthur Drews. It does not seem so fitting that Messrs. Watts should publish a book by Dr. F.C. Conybeare. It is true that Dr. Conybeare is as radical a critic as it is possible for a scholar to be. But then he is a scholar. The other men whose books Messrs. Watts publish are not. When his Myth, Magic, and Morals appeared in the same advertisement as the books of Mr. J. M. Robertson and the rest, it was understood that Dr. Conybeare, Honorary Fellow of University College, Oxford, Honorary LL.D. of the University of St. Andrews, Honorary Doctor of Theology of Gießen, member of the British Academy, and member of the Armenian Academy of Venice, etc., had gone over to the materialists, and for the sake of companionship in his utter radicalism, had cast in his lot with the unlearned and the ignorant who belonged to the Rationalist Press Association. But Messrs. Watts have Historical Christ, paren 3s dot 6d dot net, close paren. Dr. Conybeare is not comfortable in his present company. In this book, he turns on the 3 men who have obtained some glory by denying the historical existence of Jesus. Mr. J. M. Robertson, Dr. Andrew Drews, and Professor W. B. Smith, and makes an exposure of their ignorance and incompetence, the like of which has not been seen in our day. Close quote. Undoubtedly, my father, with his strong historical sense, saw clearly that the Jesuits and the Christists could not have any object in hoaxing their own and all subsequent generations. and in building up a lasting cult and church on what they knew to be fables. It is interesting that he applied an equally unprejudiced acumen to his defense of the historical Christ as he did to his general attack on Orthodox Christianity in Myth, Magic, and Morals. Appendix 3, Maya, by Meher Baba. Everything from the least significant to the most momentous is here within us. The spiritual planes with their indescribably divine splendor, and the gross plane of immeasurable space, together with its innumerable gross universes, are all within us. That is because God is in us and we are in God. God is indivisibly, uncompromisingly, infinitely, and eternally one in his impeccable oneness. The apparently endless differences in the experiences of animate and inanimate beings and things are due to the varying degrees of consciousness on the different planes, and the ability and inability to apply that consciousness adequately. Achievement of full human consciousness is a great spiritual achievement. Greater still is to be able to recognize illusion and face all illusory things. The greatest achievement of man is to become God conscious, which is to become truly self or soul conscious. For example, let us presume that the difference between a spiritually enlightened and an unenlightened man is as the difference between a man who has ordinary normal faculties of seeing, hearing, smelling, and tasting, and another man who is born blind and deaf and without even the faculties of smell and taste. Now, if the two happen to be present at one and the same time in a garden full of colors, singing birds, streams, and fountains, where delicious fruits and fragrant flowers are equally available to both men, there is bound to be a world of difference between the scope, nature, and capacity of their consciousness, awareness, and experience. For the enlightened one, the world would be experienced as one full of music, full of light, and full of beauty. For the unenlightened or blind one, the same world would be merely a black, monotonous nothingness.
Thanks, Marianne. Miguel, could you unmute, please, and continue?
If we stretch the above simile further and imagine that a miracle happens by which the unenlightened one begins to have one after another the faculties of smell, hearing, sight, and taste, we can have some idea of how man's consciousness begins to be transported through the different planes of the path towards God consciousness. The man then begins to realize that all the differences amount simply to a difference in his own state of consciousness, which experiences inner truths more and more as it is freed increasingly from external illusions. The force that keeps a man spiritually blind, deaf, etc., is his own ignorance, which is governed by the principle of cosmic ignorance, generally known as Maya. To understand Maya is to understand half the universe. All false values and false beliefs are due to the grip of Maya. Intellect, in particular, plays into the hands of Maya. For intellect is not capable of that consciousness which realizes that God is truth. Truth can only be known after one transcends the cosmic illusion, which appears as real owing to Maya. The principle of ignorance, that is Maya, can only be transcended when one spiritual aspirant is able to realize that Maya is God's shadow, and as such is nothing. The enigma of Maya solves itself only after self-realization. All the great philosophers who are not bound by their materialistic prejudice have had glimpses of reality and have recognized the principle of ignorance as being responsible for making all illusory and transient things appear as lasting and real. Scientists naturally have difficulty in accepting mystical conclusions relating to the transitory world and cosmos, since metaphysical perceptions cannot be reached by methods acceptable to the experimental rules of science. The main difficulty in grasping such a concept in its totality is that it will necessitate a full knowledge of the cosmic scheme. It is not possible even for a master to explain that which is beyond the limits of the human mind. He can only make one realize it by means of his grace and by his enlightenment. Appendix 4, Reincarnation. For a dissertation on reincarnation, it is suggested that the reader should study the discourses. If we are able to believe that we survive death, then it is reasonable to believe that we can also precede birth. But the theory of reincarnation without some understanding of karma or the law of cause and effect will be difficult to deal with. And again, the many points are too complicated for one who is not competent to explain them. But we do know that children sometimes have strong recollections of a former life, though in the West, no heed is paid to their quote-unquote fairy tales. In India, China, and Buddhist countries, they are listened to. And there are many famous and authenticated stories connected with them. In the West, people can sometimes believe that they have existed before from experiences in dreams where they have glimpses into past experiences. Hypnosis seems to have been successful in confirming knowledge of pre-existence through data subsequently checked from official records. But such cases must be very rare. Socrates said that, quote unquote, all knowledge is only remembering. Some of the Greek philosophers regarded the belief of a self-evident truth, regarded the belief as a self-evident truth. At one time, it was widely accepted amongst the Jews. And certainly the early Christians held the view till later the church pronounced such belief to be heretical after it had instituted the doctrine of the virgin birth in the 2nd and 3rd century. In the year 553 AD, the Church Council of Constantinople pronounced, quote, Whoever shall support the mythical doctrine of pre-existence of the soul and the consequent wonderful opinion of its return, let him be anathema. End quote. Jesus was always telling us that we had to be born again. He meant it in a literal as well as a symbolical sense. He said, quote unquote, before Abraham was I am, etc. Such statements enraged the Pharisees of the time. It is well known that when he asked his disciples who men thought he was, they replied, quote, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, another Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. End of quote. That's from Matthew 16:14. Some of the early fathers certainly believe in this theory. Notable Origen, AD 125, who wrote, quote, every soul has existed from the beginning and comes into this world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of his previous life. His work in this world determines his place in the world, which is to follow this. End quote. Meher Baba tells us that everything and everyone in the universe is constrained to move along a path which is perforce prescribed by its past. Quote, there is an inexorable must that, that reigns over all things, big or small, whether one is male or female, rich or poor, strong or weak, beautiful or ugly, intelligent or dull. One cannot escape being such because one must necessarily be so, due to the impressions of the past. The freedom which man seems to enjoy is itself subject to inner impressional compulsions, and the environmental pressures that limits the scope of reactions that mold the reacting self is itself subject to the inexorable must, which is perennially operative in the past, present, and future. Man has his name, his sex, his personality, his color, his nationality, his characteristics, his pain and pleasure, and all that he may possess just because he must have all this. The overpowering compulsion is exercised by the sheer force of innumerable impressions gathered in the past. These accumulated impressions cloud the consciousness of the self at every stage, in every incarnation of the future, which, in one's lifetime, is part and portion of one's living present. The rule of this inexorable must governs and reshapes the so-called destiny of men in every incarnation. As long as the self of man remains conscious of impressions. This rule of must, which overrides human plans of other living beings, is based on divine law, which both adjust and gets adjusted by the evolutionary impressions. It is only the divine will that can supersede the divine law. End of the quotes. Meher Baba tells us that, quote, there's so many deaths during the one whole life, beginning from the evolution of consciousness to the end of the involution of consciousness, are like so many sleeps during one lifetime. End of quote. Another quote, one who lives for himself is truly dead, and one who dies for God is truly alive. End of the quote. And there is a asterisk that to see God speaks.
Another minute, please, Miguel.
Appendix 5, thought forms. I am not competent to write on this subject, so can only make some general observations of what I have gathered from various sources. Si Eunice Sabait, si VLC Pauvet, or something like that. These sad lines have often haunted me. If youth could be known the power of thought. Let me repeat that. If youth could but know the power of thought, will we not then have a worldwide transformation? It is an axiom that thoughts are things. Also that nature follows man's thoughts. The power of thought is fully demonstrated in miracles. The faith behind thought has the energizing power to heal broken bones instantaneously and to cure cancer and all manner of disease. We have only to investigate such cases, healed by the prayers of no matter what faith, church, or school of thought, to see what can be done and what has been done. Thought forms, as observed by sensitives, show the tangible substance of which they are made. And we know that scientists have photographed thought, and its oscillations can be produced on graphs. These mental impressions leave their imprint, good or bad, in the semi-subtle regions. A friend once told me of some astral journeys he had made in which he had encountered some appealing shapes, which appeared to be floating aimlessly in the air, and alas, not always so aimlessly, for such is the power of thought that it can become externalized into good as well as bad entities that bring harm on their progenitors and humanity at large. Thus, the evil thought forms of hate and violence in the last two world wars have hastened the disintegration of civilization at large. When we meet an individual, whether we know it or not, we contact his field of consciousness, and he also feels ours. Therefore, victims and persecutors alike can react on one another individually and collectively as well. We build up our own thought forms, so are responsible for them. If we think harmoniously and constructively, our mental activities work on rapport with us in the right direction. But if we think destructively, then disharmony rules the air, for we have created evil entities who react adversely on ourselves and our environment. Quote, as above, so below, end of the quote. And indeed, we know that the air is much disturbed by the unspiritual reactions of our civilization. Some think that this is due to nuclear explosions, and this may well be so, but the physical climate is also conditioned by our mental climate.
Thanks, Miguel. I'll take a turn. It is not generally known, however, that the substance of thought is so tangible and so plastic that it can create its own conventional heavens and hells. Max Heindel, founder of the Rosicrucian Fellowship of Southern California, in describing journeys taken with a guide in the astral worlds, mentions in one of his books that in one journey he was taken to a large temple filled with ethereal people saying, "This is God's holy city." Heindel, being puzzled, asked his guide the meaning of all this and where he was and why there were gates and walls of crystal round the city. Why, in fact, was everything made of crystal? He received the following reply. It is one of the peculiarities of the desire astral world that it is extremely plastic and molded by thought. In the twinkling of an eye, it takes the most different shapes according to the thought that ensouls it. And where many people upon earth think upon similar lines, all their thoughts mass themselves and form a grand whole. Thus, in the lower regions of the desire world, the thoughts of people who believe in a fiery furnace like hell make of the desire stuff there a place of torture. There we may see devils with horns, hooves, and tails, prodding the unhappy sinners with pitchforks. And often when people pass out at death, after having lived in that belief, they are in a sad state of fear of beholding the place they have helped to create. There is also in the higher realms of the desire world a city much as you describe, a new Jerusalem with pearly gates, with a sea of glass and its great white throne upon which is seated the thought form of God, created by these people and appearing like an old man. It is probable that you visited this place, which is a permanent feature of the desire world and will remain so as long as people continue to think of the New Jerusalem in this way. For the forms have no life apart from the sustained thoughts of mankind. And in time, when Christian humanity will have outgrown that faith, the city created by their thoughts will cease to exist. Its crystal-like appearance is due to the exceeding brilliance of the desire stuff of which it is built. The old alchemists called the desire worlds astral or starry on that account. We know that the Bible has given a similar account of the New Jerusalem and is responsible for the building up of this particular thought scheme. Then again, Christian fanatics or those who wished to dominate others created the hell to which so many go, not always because they deserved it, but because they believed in such a place. In Latin countries, when out walking, I have often passed little shrines with people depicted wriggling in hell flames. When we realize the effect on an illiterate mentality, it would not be surprising that hell as depicted should last a long time. One has only to read Un Appel à l'Amour, published by the Roman Catholic Church, to realize the reality of hell in the Christian faith through this history of that little nun, Josepha, who died some years back. When this little saint, for what else could she be, went into a trance, she would descend into hell to rescue souls. And the superiors and the nuns around her witnessed the burns on her body, which lasted till her death. Her undergarments were burnt and have been kept as relics at La Maison des Fouillons near Poitiers. Also, those with Josepha during her ordeals could smell the sulfur and fetid odors of hell, which seemed to remain with her for quite a while after she came out of her trance state. In this convent of the Sacred Heart, this humble and courageous little nun also went through terrible sufferings in her struggles with the devil, who persecuted her for making atonement for the sins of the world and for rescuing souls from his grasp. Josepha also had meetings and conversations with Jesus, who appeared to her. From the accounts in this book, the personality of Jesus resembled a conventional thought form, for his actions and sayings bear no relation to modern life. He was always beseeching Josepha to go down into hell for him, to rescue souls from eternal torment and the power of the devil. This book has inspired thousands of Catholics and brought many back to the fold of the church. It is a striking example of the thought form world built up by the church, and such ideas will persist as long as people believe in such phenomena. One of my friends who travels in her astral body, quote unquote, when asleep at night and comes back with recollections in the morning of where she has been, and has told me of some of her experiences very similar to those of Max Heindel. On one occasion, her guide took her to an immense building in which she saw numbers of recumbent forms looking as if they had been turned into stone. They were lying on couches. When she asked her guide for the meaning of this, he explained, they were people who were waiting for the last trumpet. He added, nothing will wake them up. On another occasion, she saw soldiers fighting battles. On asking the reason, it was explained that many soldiers killed in action do not realize that they are dead and go on fighting for a time. I trust the reader will not conclude from some of these remarks, which only touch on the fringe of this incomprehensible and confusing subject, that man is going to escape wrongdoing. By karmic law, he will have to pay, and pay to the uttermost farthing for all he should not have done during his earth life, though perhaps not always in the way he expects. But it does seem that people will go to the places they expect to go to, or will be located on the spots to which their propensities or passions draw them. Having lost the blunting physical body, their astral senses are infinitely more acute, so that they feel intensely, whether it be pleasure or pain. Those who have had low and criminal tastes before death follow their inclinations after death. Inebriates remain earthbound and frequent drinking saloons, where, unable to satisfy their thirst, they will egg on living persons, increasing their thirst. Gamblers will go to gambling halls, etc. The so-called tortures that follow are due to the gnawing and insatiable cravings of the fetters forged by earth life, from which they are unable to escape until they can work out their sanskaras. Good place to pick up next